Hello guys! Welcome everyone back to the episode of Mando-Monday. This is the series where you guys ask the questions and I of course answer them. And that could be to do with anything related to Counter-Strike 2, Valve, future upcoming updates such as CS2's first operation, future update or addition to the armory, or maybe it's new returning maps, modes, weapons, or features. If you guys have a question you want a shot at being answered in next week's video, leave it down below this comment section as well as my many weekly community posts that I typically put out right before Mando-Monday arrives. Now this week's episode of Mando-Monday is very interesting, where we break down how co-op missions could be making a comeback very soon and what that could mean for CS2, CS Legacy's release, and if Valve devs will actually let it come out, CS2's next map pool change, alongside a bunch more. But before we go any further, I want to thank SkinsMonkey for sponsoring today's video. Are you bored of your current Counter-Strike loadout and want to trade it out for something different? SkinsMonkey has you covered. As a buying and trading marketplace, SkinsMonkey offers amazing deals and the fastest way to trade out your old skins for something new. By using my code Mando, you can get up to a free $5 by spending $100 or more, as well as you also get a 35% deposit bonus when topping up your balance. With SkinsMonkey's large variety of skins, they also offer daily, weekly, and monthly giveaways. If interested, the link will be at the top of the description down below. Now, firstly, for today's video, I want to discuss and talk about the current state of CS2 before we go any further with the questions. There's a few things I want to cover, such as the declining recent player count within CS2. Some other things worth mentioning is the fact we've had no updates and we'll have nothing until the 14th with Season 3 of Premiere. The sale for the Austin Major stickers is very far behind, and with that being said, so will be the content coming afterwards. So with the declining player count within CS2, at least over this last month, we've seen the first dips under 1 million players every day, which that's been the first time it's happened in a little over 4 months. At least it's pretty close to it anyway. Now there's a couple things for this that are worth mentioning. During the Steam summer sale, during the summertime for CS, at least in its past and at least in Counter-Strike's very long history, players decide to leave the game. They try out other things, especially while the Steam summer sale is on. And it's almost like the devs know this because they never really tend to update at least while that sale is going. Because if they do anything or release anything big during that time, they're not going to get all eyes and all the money they can possibly get versus if they just released it on its own time. Now with the current status of updates and the fact that we'll see nothing at least until July 14th with Season 3 of Premiere, this kind of falls under the same category at least with the declining player count in the Steam summer sale. Valve's gonna wait till it's over, and this in my opinion is just more of a reason for them to kind of push this off. So because of the Steam summer sale, I think this is a big reason why we've seen so many delays, at least as of recently. But when Season 3 of Premiere does arrive, we're most likely gonna see some pretty big game changes or at least additions, at least with maps in my opinion, because they're going to want to draw some players in that one haven't returned in quite some time or just overall brand new players. And a meta change in my opinion is just not going to do it. So I think at the very least we're probably going to see cash as it was spotted and seen in the game files alongside a bunch else. But another thing that a lot of people aren't even really mentioning is the sale of the stickers. Valve took over almost 2 weeks to add the Champions capsule. So with that, we're already very behind schedule versus as we were in the past. The sticker sale in my opinion is probably not going to go 75% off until at least next month in my opinion, or at least closer to the end of this month, and then those stickers are probably going to be on the shop until early next year, or at least until a couple of weeks before the next major begins at the end of 2025. Now let me know what you guys think. I just wanted to say a couple things about the current state of CS2 because people are panicking, people are worrying, but don't worry, this is pretty normal. Valve's timing is actually pretty important, but also just makes sense for everybody. With that being said, let's hop into today's questions. Our first question up here for today's video / statement is about co-op missions. This guy says we need co-op missions back. Imagine what new stuff they can do now. And yeah, I 100% agree. I think co-op missions not just need to return, but when and if they do, like in your question, they're going to be absolutely amazing because of the Source 2 engine capabilities. Now CSGO, at least towards the end, like with Operation Riptide, though we didn't really have any co-op missions with Riptide, last ones we had were in Broken Fang, Valve was really pushing the Source 1 engine and its limits. And with CS2, there's a lot more we can do now where the game can just run a lot more, the devs can be more innovative, and where we're not working on a 20-year-old game. So in my personal opinion, I would and should expect some sort of cutscenes, more gameplay, different features that you actually have to invest your time into that actually makes it worthwhile. And I've said this in the past, what would be really cool with an operation / style co-op mission setup would be for Valve to set up some sort of map that has some sort of leaderboards that everyone in Counter-Strike, every Counter-Strike player can access who plays the missions. And I'm not sure if you're gonna have to buy a pass, so on and so forward, but have almost like a shoot house simulator like you had in COD 4, where you have to complete it in your best time, and imagine the ins and outs that people could find within the matter of just a couple of weeks, not to mention 2 to 3 months. And maybe they could change the map up maybe every 5 months. Just food for thought, but I also will mention co-op missions have been seen in game files over the last 2 years, but my question is this just all reused assets? We've seen this with maps and different game modes in the past, and as of right now in CS2, I actually think it's a bit of both. I mean, I do have some questions with this. If they did make a comeback, how would they work? Would they be a part of the armory, or would they be a part of something bigger like an operation? Well, I hate this answer, but it really could be both. It could be an operation, it could be a part of the armory, not to mention it could be its own thing. Now, ever since the armory released within CS2, most players, including myself, thought operations are pretty much off the table and are never going to come back to CS2, let alone Counter-Strike, anytime soon. I mean, it just doesn't really make any sense. But with all the recent leaks and things through data mines that we've seen after updates, I think operations and an operation coming at least within 2025, maybe early 2026 is actually quite possible. We're going to have to soon get a refresh to the armory. We're supposedly getting new maps and modes such as retakes, cache, maybe lake, and the game overall just needs some big quality of life improvements, not to mention big features and add-ons to gameplay to make it feel a little less stale. And with things seen as night maps and game files as of recently, and really that's just the beginning, who's to say we couldn't get an operation already added on to what we have here in CS2, or just operation style missions for the armory, where if you've bought a pass in the past or will buy a pass in the future, you can access it, and there you go. Everyone's happy, it works for everybody. But let me know what you guys think. I think seeing some sort of co-op mission in the future would be very interesting, let alone very viable. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Our next question / statement up here is from Zeltar, and he says we need CS Legacy. Now, CS Legacy has been slated and stated for release sometime in 2025, but will it happen? But before we go any further, for those who don't know, let's quickly brief over what Classic Offensive is and was. Now, CS Legacy was originally created by a bunch of ex-CS Pro Mod devs, but are now slating this game for having a release sometime in 2025. We just don't know when. Now, unlike Counter-Strike mods in the past, like Classic Offensive, this was really only seen in production by people within the community for over maybe the last few months. But just because it was only announced just a few months ago doesn't mean it's not important, let alone has a lot of eyes on it. The trailers for CS Legacy have some of the most views I've ever seen for a mod for a video game, let alone Counter-Strike. Getting millions of views, millions of supporters, and millions of viewers for your mod just within the last couple of months is pretty crazy. And for those who don't know, this is pretty much all based on the Source 1 engine. They're doing this all on CSGO. The game apparently runs great. They're making their own weapons, making their own textures, and they're combining the best of both worlds with pretty much all Counter-Strike titles aside from CS2. Really just CS Source, CS 1.6, and CSGO kind of all put into one. But I personally have quite a few questions about this game's future, and I know you guys do too. The biggest one is, will Valve shut them down just like they did with Classic Offensive? Now, the quick answer to this is we don't know, but I'm assuming probably not, which makes me further ask, will and did they use leaked code like what Valve found with Classic Offensive? Which then leads to me having questions for Valve. What if this is more popular than CS2? Will devs act and not let it release? And what I mean by that is because of the current state of CS2, which is I also kind of think what happened here with Classic Offensive, at least in a way, because let's just say Classic Offensive released like it was supposed to just a few months ago. With the current state that CS2 was in, with the declining player count, with the skins market, and the lack of content, I think it's pretty safe to say that a majority, or at least a decent chunk of the CS2 player base would have gone over to CS Legacy, no questions asked. It's a familiar engine, familiar maps, but also on a familiar game, with things the community actually wants, unlike what we had with CS2 at that time, and some may say even right now. I know it looks bad for CS and just overall Valve mods for their games, but if they're not using any leaked data, leaked code, I don't see why Valve would just let it not release. Yes, it would be some sort of competitor, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to release sometime in the future, and it's going to make for a pretty interesting term of events in the Counter-Strike community. And to end today's question, I want to ask you guys a question based on this topic. If CS Legacy released right now, would you leave everything behind with CS2 and just go play that if it had full dev support, matchmaking, so on and so forth? And if you did, why would you do that? Our next question up here for today's video is regarding the butterfly knife and older knives returning to Counter-Strike sometime in the future. This question up here is from Hubson. He asks, do you think in the new update they will bring back a case with classic butterfly knife finishes, or maybe sometime in the future? Because I want to buy one, I'm afraid of them coming back in some type of way. I really want to deep dive into this question, but I also want to mention, if you're thinking about buying one, just go in and do it. This is a whole lot of what if. This question surrounds a bunch of theories, ideas that probably will never happen, and there's some very good reasoning for it. I mean, I know throwing that type of cash at any sort of microtransaction or skin in a video game is pretty crazy, but buying really anything in Counter-Strike just kind of seems nuts nowadays because of the prices, which therefore your reasoning is very understandable. But if the market performs like it has over the last 10 years, if you bought it, it probably would do pretty well over the next few. And I don't see it really just dropping or, well, disappearing anytime in the near future, because if it did, well, Counter-Strike would be in a lot more trouble than I think than just a butterfly knife. Not to mention, when it comes to Counter-Strike and buying skins, investing, collecting, or just buying skins in general, this is just kind of part of the game. You have to know with not just skins, but your Steam account and all your games on it, what you own on it, what the things you've put into it. You don't own it. Valve and Steam does. And at any point in time, if Valve decides to remove trading, add another trade hold, change up the market, or re-release old skins, they can do so, but it probably won't happen. And like we stated earlier, if this did happen, Counter-Strike, Steam, and Valve would be in a lot more trouble than just the market for CS2 going bonkers. Now to go a little bit further into your question, this question was actually a commentary I made back on YouTube just a few years ago when I really started doing CS content. And 4 to 5 years ago, I came to the same, if not very close conclusion to what we have right now in today's video. Overall, it could happen, but why would it? Valve makes a boatload of money off something new or a continuation off older knives with new finishes. There's really just no sense of re-releasing older knives. If this did happen, it would be a quick cash grab and nothing new. But if nothing new releases, what's really the point? I mean, at this moment with all the new knives, we still need gamma and older finishes on them before we can really move forward. Something like that, in my opinion, is more likely to happen than having older knives and finishes returning. Not to mention we need new gloves, older gloves with different finishes, so on and so forth. At this moment, and I think for the next 10 years, Valve has ideas and has plans for something else for golds than just re-releasing older content. Valve, not to mention, likes to keep the market interesting. This way, it makes it easier for older players returning and new players coming to the game for the first time ever. The skins market being so rare and niche as it is, or at least was, is what drives so many people to play CS, and I don't see Valve ruining or changing that anytime soon, at least for some sort of quick cash grab. In my opinion, old knives like this, in situations like this, are just retired. Very similar to a Lego set. You can buy them, just not from the original manufacturer. But an anniversary, maybe some sort of new take on something old, like newer finishes on the butterfly knives, yeah, I still think that's quite possible. But yeah, I didn't really mean to ramble too much on your question. If you're thinking about buying one, I would just buy one. Go with it, stick with it, and move forward. Now, our next question up here for today's video was in regards to the map pool, but specifically Overpass. This is from Luxy B, and he says, what happened to Overpass? Now, Overpass is a pretty interesting map where it did release in CS2's limited test, and it was shown in the first original CS2 trailers. It was completely overhauled for the Source 2 engine, and players were shocked. That being said, we did see some competitive action with it, but not for long. CS2 was changing at that time and changing fast with its current map pool. Instead of Valve devs releasing new maps that we had yet to see within CS, or just within CS2 at that time, they kind of just decided to move around what we already had and call it a done day, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it got boring and boring very quickly. Now here in mid-2025, we still have the same maps from CSGO, let alone the same maps from when CS2 released, and nothing's changed about it. Now it's not necessarily like we mentioned a bad thing, but having some change ups, having some spice ups could be something interesting and nice to see sometime in the future. Now Overpass returning itself, I actually think is quite possible in the near future. There's a couple reasons for this. Now during the Shanghai Major back in late 2024, for what feels like the first time in history, during a CS2 Major, devs were actually updating the map even though it wasn't in the competitive map pool. And at that point, it was just taken out of the CS2 competitive map pool. But I think also showed a lot of people that they still care about the map, and based on it not being played all too much, they were trying their best to make it new, make it refreshing, so that players can maybe play it sometime one day in the future for the competitive map pool. Now the competitive map pool just as a whole, I think is going to be seeing some bigger changes within the near future. I think we're going to see cash, fun maps, one-off maps like Lake, but also Overpass somehow return to the competitive map pool, let alone CS2. Let me know what you guys think. What map do you want to see most next? And do you miss Overpass? Ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much concludes today's episode of Mando-Monday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you all for the great and amazing questions. I had a really fun time answering them, and I hope you guys had a great time watching. If you guys have a question you want a shot at being answered in next week's episode of Mando-Monday, leave it down below of this one or my weekly community posts. Ladies and gentlemen, fall out.